Greetings. This is the 9th dimensional Pleiadian Collective. So we would be the kind of collective who would perhaps construct a ship to house one of you on planet Earth so we could alter your genetic makeup as desired, which is what Nora experienced as a young child. At about the age of 3, Nora was taken and altered genetically and then returned to her neighborhood. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember very clearly the experience. We were getting ready, my mother and my younger sister and I, she was about 1 at the time, were getting ready to walk down to the end of the block to visit with some friends. And I clearly remember, as if it were 5 minutes ago, a being who looked exactly like my mother. So at the time, I, of course, believed that this was my mother, saying to me, "I'm going to change your sister's diaper. You walk on ahead." Right. So 3, 4-year-old Nora did that. I walked out the front door of my house and then was missing for a period of time and was found, I'm not sure how long later. I have no memory of what occurred between the moment I walked out the front door and the moment I was found. I was found a couple houses down the block in the backyard. I was punished for that because my mother was terrified. I was incredibly angry at the time that I had been punished because my mother had told me, "You walk on ahead and we'll catch up." So when the Pleiadians began to talk about my genetic manipulation at that age, I realized, oh, that's what happened that day. That's exactly what occurred. I was taken, I was altered. So my perspective is that something was switched on, something perhaps was even added to my genetic makeup that makes it easier for me to remember my Pleiadian identity and also have telepathic communication with the Pleiadians. Just makes it easier for me than perhaps somebody else. It doesn't mean other people can't have as easy of a time. This just made it easier, especially for when I started channeling. When I began channeling back in 1996, we were in a much denser vibration here on planet Earth. It was much more difficult to channel back then. I used to have to take quite a bit of time to be able to raise my vibration enough to establish contact because I was working through so much density. We have altered collectively, humanity, our vibration at such an accelerated rate that establishing contact today is so much easier for everyone. So I think that's what that manipulation helped with as well. This is the 12th dimensional Pleiadian Collective. Again here, there are many different reasons for the quote-unquote abduction experience. There is the one Nora spoke about, and that was something she had contracted to experience. That's something we want to be clear about as well. This is not something that was done to 3-year-old Nora. Before the being that calls herself Nora incarnated, before that incarnation occurred, she scheduled that interaction because she knew that would help her in this lifetime be who it is she intended to be. So there's that kind of interaction, there's that genetic manipulation, and there's a lot of that occurs, much more than all of you have any idea about. The abduction phenomenon, and again we put that in quotation marks, is much more common than most of you realize. So there's that piece. But then there are many other beings and species abducting, experimenting, connecting with all of you, giving you experiences for a variety of reasons. Some, again, are to help awaken, help create awareness, and if you decide you want to awaken in this life to the truth that you have extraterrestrial genetic material or you have been extraterrestrial, well, what better way to wake up than be taken aboard a craft as a young person? That's really going to open your eyes. Now, you may not have memory of it in the next day. Most of you don't, in fact. But energetically, you have a memory of it. Emotionally, you feel different after that experience, and that sets you on a path of asking questions, looking in different directions, detaching perhaps from religious programming or the programming you receive in your schools that keep you dense, that keep you in that third dimensional mindset. So there's that occurs. And then there are hybridization programs that are occurring with a variety of different species. The one that you're the most familiar with is the program that the Zeta Reticula have been involved with for a very long time now, for hundreds of years. You often call the Zeta Reticula the Greys. That's the name that you will refer to them to on your planet, and that's because you see them as little gray beings with the big eyes. We'll talk about their journey for a bit. The Greys are the descendants of the Lyrans and the Fairy. The Lyran and the Fairy created a hybrid species together many, many millions of years ago that at some point fragmented itself into two different subspecies, one being full-fledged fairy, the other being the Zeta Reticula. The Zeta Reticula were a group of beings who were very interested in developing their mental bodies and technology that could allow them to use their mental bodies to do many different things. So they switched off at some point emotionally. When they switched their emotional bodies off over the course of time, and this was a natural evolutionary process that occurred for them. So it's not like they collectively said, let's turn off our emotional bodies. That was a manifestation of them turning off their emotional bodies, meaning separating, disassociating themselves so far from their emotional experience that cut off occurred. When that happened, they no longer were able to physically procreate. They were no longer able to birth children. Well, that wasn't a problem for them because they had developed cloning technology, so to propagate their species, they began to clone. Well, over time, they realized their clones were degrading. They were breaking down, because you can only copy something so many times before it begins to lose its substance, its matter. So suddenly, they found their species dying off. At that point in time, they looked out across the universe, looked at their history, remembered their connection to Earth, because they had a connection to Earth back on Lemuria, and began to interact with the Earthlings here, the humanoids here, to find a genetic common ground so they could create a hybrid species. That was the ultimate outcome. What they were really trying to do first was figure out how to procreate again. What became clear to them after many, many missteps and failures along the way was they weren't going to be able to do that in their current condition. So what they compromised with was this hybridization program where they took genetic material from many, many Earthlings and created a hybrid species, which does exist. So once the Zetas discovered that they were going to need to do something else to expand their experience, because they are third and fourth dimensional beings. So they're not just pulling in energetic fragments to expand their collective consciousness. They experience something of a birth and a death, as you all do. They're in the third dimension. As they realized they were going to have to do something else to propagate their species, they looked out across the universe and remembered their connection to Earth, because they do have a connection to Earth. It is not just that these little gray beings from outer space have been coming to your world taking Earthlings. It is that your family members have been coming to you for help. That's the truth of the story. And that's why, of course, those of you who have allowed yourselves to be taken agreed to the experience in the first place, because You knew you were helping family. So initially, there was the desire to just switch on their reproductive abilities. And over time, it became aware to them that they weren't going to be able to just do that, switch on their reproductive abilities. And that was what the large part of the first abduction experiences were about. And those experiences were extremely uncomfortable for any who experienced them, because you were being explored and examined in your reproductive and sexual areas. It was terrifying, and for those of you who had those experiences, back in we would say all the way up through the 1970s, you still carry with you today, most likely, some trauma that feels like sexual abuse trauma. It's very similar. We see this again and again in our work with all of you. Many of you who have abduction trauma feel like somebody who was sexually abused. And that's because there was that interaction that occurred at that time as you were a small child, feeling powerless and helpless, and your reproductive organs were being explored, examined. But again, it became clear to the Zetas they weren't going to be able to just switch on their own reproductive systems by examining all of you. So then they switched their intention and their desire. And there was a crossover here. So that understanding they became aware of probably in the 1940s. But they still were trying. There were a faction who were really bent on switching on their own reproductive organs. They weren't ready to give up that battle, so to speak. But there were another group who said, all right, this is better than nothing. So let's create a hybrid species. Let's take our genetic material and genetic material from those humanoids incarnating on planet Earth at this time. And a hybrid species was created. And that hybrid species exists in a number of different places. So you have hybrids existing off-world on ships, some housed on bases on other planets, and those are beings who could not exist on Earth at this time. Their energy, their vibration, their frequency is so discordant with the particular vibration on Earth at this time, they could not sustain life here. And then you have hybrids who are incarnate here on Earth at this time. And we'll tell you that many of those you are diagnosing with autism, ADHD, ADD, on and on, are actually hybrids. So these are beings who operate on a different vibration, a different frequency bandwidth. And it appears they are having a problematic time adjusting to the vibration on Earth. They're not supposed to adjust. Our recommendation is that you all adjust your vibration to theirs, because they are here to teach you all, these hybrids that you are diagnosing and medicating. Now, you're using that word autism as a huge umbrella term to describe many, many different issues on your planet. Not all who are being diagnosed with autism or Asperger's or other kinds of issues are Zeta Earthling hybrids. Not all. We want to be clear about that. They have other things going on with them vibrationally, physically, mentally, emotionally, but many are. So we'd like you all to explore that a bit more, to expand your consciousness here in that direction, because these younger beings need your help. They need that level of recognition, but they can only help and facilitate if you allow yourselves to connect with them on their frequency bandwidth. They are very telepathic, all of these beings. And you see that in your autistic, especially the children now. They have speech issues, or a lot of them don't speak, and their telepathy is so advanced that they're picking up every thought you have, every judgment, every fear, and that tends to shut them down very quickly. And then they go into hiding. They feel unable to then even operate here because they have to work through all that judgment. So it all happens through agreement, but there are a number of steps that go along with that agreement. The first thing you've got to do if you want to have contact, and there are many different ways to have contact. So there's this level of contact, which is telepathic and energetic. But then there's physical contact. There is that actual being taken aboard a ship or having a being manifest itself in your space, transport themselves to your living space or somewhere near you. And then there's the UFO phenomenon, the establishing contact with ships, seeing ships. So the first thing you have to do to be able to establish contact is believe it is possible for you to have contact. You cannot go into that experience saying, I will only believe that extraterrestrials are real once I see one. It would be like saying to yourself, I will only believe that the grass is green because I see it's green. That's not why you believe the grass is green. You believe the grass is green because you have co-created a reality together and you decided to paint the grass green. Grass is really not green. You see it that way through your own lens. So you've got to believe, you've got to have that sense of certainty. It's okay to have a bit of doubt, all right? You can and you will. Many of you will have doubt. Even those of you who have contact still have doubt, still have questions. Because that's what the third dimensional mind is going to want to do. It's going to want to interject that kind of doubt. It's there to filter out these bigger kinds of experiences. So you tell yourself, yes, I believe. I have a belief. I have a sense that there is life out there in other forms, in other dimensions. And then you say, I desire to connect. Now, the next step you want to take is you want to then ask for the highest vibrational experience possible for you. Because that's really what you're looking for. We don't think a lot of you, or maybe any of you, really want to be picked up right now by a reptilian ship. Or a ship where a lower vibrational entity is running the show. So ask for the highest vibrational experience you are capable of at this time. More often than not, what you will then experience is either this level of contact, telepathic, or you will see things in the sky. If you think you see a ship, if you even have that thought, I think that's a ship, you have. Now, in the next second, you may look again and notice it no longer looks like a ship. Doesn't mean it wasn't a ship. The ETs out there are very good at disguising their presence, and they do it very quickly. If you think you see a ship, if you think you've had that experience, you have. Even if it then looks like a plane the next time you look at it. That's cover. That's their technology, their ability to do that. To have direct physical contact with perhaps like a Zeta Reticula or another being like that, you could certainly ask for that. And you may even experience that, but most likely you won't remember it at this point in time. The reason for that is because to have physical contact in that way is still too vibrationally jarring for most of you. To have a Zeta Reticula stand in your living room would trigger a fear response in your physical body that would make it difficult for you to enjoy the interaction.